It just makes sense that the New York Stock Exchange would be located in New York, right? Kind of like asking someone, do you know who's in Grant's tomb? But according to the very president of the organization that owns the New York Stock Exchange, it may have to move. Why? Higher taxes. It's just another example of how nothing is nailed down to the floor. Everything's up for grabs. And today, just like big organizations that are moving to more tax-friendly pastures, you can do the same. I'm going to tell you the story of the New York Stock Exchange and lessons we can learn from it right now. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. Here at Nomad Capitalist, our team of 36 people worldwide, our network of global experts curated by me over the last dozen years, and of course, me, help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com with an article today from the Wall Street Journal entitled, "The New York Stock Exchange Isn't Moving Yet." This is written by Stacey Cunningham, who, if you know about the New York Stock Exchange, you know that she's the president of NYC Euronext, which owns said exchange. This is not speculation. This is not some journalist or some random YouTuber talking about how the New York Stock Exchange might move. This is the very president of that organization saying a revived stock transfer tax that is moving in Albany could force us to find a new home. Stacey writes, "The New York Stock Exchange belongs in New York, but if Albany lawmakers get their way, however, the center of the global financial industry may need to find a new home." On a Wednesday, this is from February 9th, with more than 25 other representatives of New York's securities industry, I sent a letter to the state legislative leaders against the unintended consequences of imposing a transfer tax on stock sales. History's lesson is clear. If you try to squeeze more revenue from financial firms, the business will go elsewhere. And we've seen that with a number of private equity firms and hedge funds moving down to Florida. A number of years ago, many of them financial folks moved to Puerto Rico. People are moving south. They're moving out of New York. The modern New York Stock Exchange, she continues, traces its origin to the time when New York was the nation's capital, but not yet the financial capital of the world. Amsterdam held that title before surrendering the torch to London in the early 1800s, exactly when Jim Rogers said you should have moved to London if you were a smart guy. 1800, 1900 in New York, and now 2000 to Singapore. She continues, New York and the U.S. more broadly has been the center of the global financial power since the end of World War II, but not for long. But it shouldn't take its position for granted. Exactly right. Most of the original New York Stock Exchange listings were New York-based companies, their shares traded by New York-based brokers. Now the companies and their brokers are global, connected electronically throughout out-of-state servers, transacting business instantaneously. These global companies want the NYC to serve them in the most efficient, least expensive way possible. And she goes on and on from there, talking about how in the state of New York, a tax on financial transactions would make it more difficult. Now, we've seen over the last number of years that more companies are going to other countries to list. I've worked with a number of folks who have talked about listing in Canada, Australia. People are now listing in London, Hong Kong. There are many choices. This is the message. I started talking about legacy brands ever since I was on Fox Business. The United States is a legacy brand. Many of the other places that I mentioned, like the United Kingdom, Canada, legacy brands. They got where they were for a reason, no doubt. But they don't want to maintain that position because now everything that got them there, they're doing the opposite. The state of New York legislators are talking about how can we squeeze financial firms as if the financial firms have nowhere else to go. The New York Stock Exchange, of course, makes sense being in New York. I remember when my father and I went there on a trip to New York City, we practically got pushed out of the way because we went in the wrong door. And that's what I remember of the New York Stock Exchange. It's a happening place. There's a lot going on, but there's no reason it has to be in New York. For the same reason that America is an idea and not a place that can be transplanted anywhere, the New York Stock Exchange can simply pack up and move anywhere else in the United States, and the companies that list on it and the people that invest in it can choose to go anywhere in the world. I was born in the United States. I own equities. I own debt. I own very little of it in the United States. Very little of it is owned in companies or in funds that are traded on or held in the New York Stock Exchange because I figured out that from a tax point of view, from many other points of view, growth all the way down the line. It's better to invest in other countries. You have new countries now all around the world opening stock exchanges for the first time. Markets like Cambodia, Armenia have stock exchanges with only 4 stocks on them now, but they're growing. Countries like Mongolia and others trying to establish their stock markets. You can laugh, but the future is not in New York. The future is not in the United States or even the West. Much of what the New York Stock Exchange has benefited from is companies that do business all around the world deciding to list on their exchange. That can all change if the government decides to screw it up. Governments in the Western world right now seem hell-bent on screwing it up. Even after more than a dozen countries in Europe had wealth taxes, and only a couple do now, proving that wealth taxes don't work, some of the politicians even admitted as such, you have countries in the English-speaking Western world now clamoring to impose wealth taxes on even the most basic levels of wealth. If you own a house anywhere near London, the UK government now wants to impose a one-time tax and take 5% of all your cash because you decided to save. Why should it be any different with stock exchanges? And so, if the New York Stock Exchange is willing to pick up and move out of its namesake location, if a transaction tax passes, why should someone who's an entrepreneur who is paying 50% of their earnings, basically making the government a 50% unearned business partner, why should you stick around and take it either? Go where you're treated best does not mean go where you're treated a little bit better. It doesn't mean stick around and hope that the politicians don't vote for the stuff that you don't want. It means pack up and move to greener pastures when better opportunities exist. When the New York Stock Exchange was the supreme trading exchange in all of the world, much of that time was when other countries weren't nearly as free as they are now. There wasn't any competition. They had a sort of monopoly. The Western world did. No longer the case. Other countries now want to be competitive. So rather than staying and writing letters to people in Albany, why not just go where you're treated best immediately? I can tell you this. I've written to politicians before, ever since I was 13 years old. You get a form letter back. They have form letters for every major issue that you write in about. They have a stamp, they stamp on it, and they send it back to you because they don't care what you think. They have their positions, and they're there to serve the majority of the population so they can get reelected. The majority of the population supports a tax on financial transactions, which to me means it's only inevitable. Which to me means it's time to go to countries where the majority of the population realizes that their bread is buttered by things like having the New York Stock Exchange or their own version of it, rather than fighting the hand that feeds them. Why not just go there? Whether you're the head of a global stock exchange or whether you're a small business owner, go where you're treated best. More people are doing it because even leaders of financial exchanges are seeing the writing is on the wall. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.